Just before we dive back into the episode, I wanted to quickly share something that might interest you, especially if today's conversation has got you thinking about your own sustainability work. Some of the things we hear most in this industry are, I wish I could connect with other people doing this work, or I'd love to turn my sustainability expertise into something more. Well, 51 to Carbon Zero, the sponsor of this podcast, have created their own referral network. And it does exactly that. This isn't about selling you something, it's actually about helping you make money while building the sustainability community we all need. So here's what's in it for you. First, you get to join a genuine community of sustainability experts who share knowledge, refer work to each other, and solve problems together. So, no more working in isolation. Secondly, there's real money involved. There's 10% plus commission on software referrals. We're talking about projects that go from 30 grand up to 100 grand. Plus, you'll be able to boost your presence by taking part in our fireside chats. I've actually got an email in front of me from Louise Stevens, one of the ambassadors, and it says that all her clients are genuinely happy because she's got a great partner and her clients love them. But here's the bigger picture. You'll be helping accelerate the sustainability transition that we all desperately need. Every referral, every connection, every collaboration moves us closer to the world we're all working towards. If this resonates with you and you want to earn some extra income, click the link in our show notes to become a 51 to Carbon Zero ambassador. Okay, back to the show. Welcome back to the Green Element podcast, where we feature business leaders and innovators transforming their operations to be more environmentally and socially sustainable. I'm your host, Will Richardson, and I can't wait to meet our guest today and help you on your journey of sustainability. Hi, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Green Element podcast. I'm really excited to explore more what Mesh Energy do and how you help organizations, because I think what's going to be brilliant from this podcast is you will allow others to understand what more they can actually do to reduce that environmental impact. Could you explain a bit about who you are and the organization you work for, please?
Sure. So I run a consultancy practice. We're a team of about 10 individuals working out of the home counties, and we are an independent and holistic energy consultancy practice. So we work with predominantly architects, private clients, commercial clients who are building buildings, doing extensions, figuring out how their offices or their homes or their buildings, almost on any scale, can be more energy efficient. And they approach us to help them navigate through planning issues, compliance, designs, all the services design that needs to go on, looking for appropriately qualified installers, helping them through an ever more complex construction process, and increasingly getting access to a lot of government money that's floating around to make buildings and businesses and private dwellings more sustainable. So we really try and act as a guide through that process to help businesses out that this may be foreign territory and is increasingly foreign territory for a lot of businesses, and bringing together all our experience to help those guys out so that it's giving them the best chance of success on their particular scheme.
And you must be phenomenally good at what you do, because it's interesting. I actually anticipated you to say that you were larger than you are, because I've mentioned you to a few people in Scotland and they know exactly who Mesh Energy are. And so you've got a very good reputation that precedes you.
Yeah, I mean that's always nice to hear. I mean, what is fascinating is that whilst sustainability and energy efficiency now, you can't get away from it. There are hundreds of articles written every single day in the press, and it's hitting mainstream media every single day. But actually, the the challenges and the people actually equipped and the consultancies equipped to deliver against that are not very great in number. And whilst there are lots and lots of companies and consultancies and very very big consultancies that are used to delivering building and construction projects, energy efficiency is a new take on that, which is tricky. And we as a business try and do a lot of promotional work through education as well, which we may well come on to talk about. But there's a lot to learn, and we do try our best to get our name out there in front of projects and people and companies so that we can help out where necessary.
I was talking at an event this morning, and one of the guests, or one of the participants, asked a question about energy efficiency, and they were talking about people's homes, but I wonder if this still is attributed to businesses where at this current moment in time our interest rates are so low that you're actually better off investing in the business, the fabric of the building that you're in, than you are to put it into an ISA, because you'll get more return on investment. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I mean the hard truth about returns on most things in the bank at the moment are that it's pretty negligible. But what is absolutely clear, in particularly in bigger buildings, the opportunity is greater to save more energy in bigger, more complex buildings. It's a very very scalable thing. Energy efficiency. You can make sometimes small differences to small developments, and very very big differences to very very big developments. So I can completely see that argument. I mean, we have something at Mesh Energy which we call the energy hierarchy, which is a lot of energy saving and sustainability is based on a lot of common sense and rules of physics, and fabric efficiency is right up there. If you're looking at the best way to get, let's say, bang for your buck, if you had 10 quid in your pocket, what's the best way of spending that? Well, if you can better insulate the jacket the jacket that goes around the building, and regardless of what your heating system is, or whatever your fuel is for keeping that building warm, you've changed that for the better, regardless of what you're using for the lifetime of the insulation that you've put on there. So, and energy efficiency, particularly around fabric improvements, has a massive effect. Has an even greater effect when the running costs are much higher. So if you had a manufacturing facility or a big tower block of offices, there's some big changes that you can make for not spending a great deal of money.
And does it depend on the type of building that you have for the type of insulation that you would use? I mean, is there more environmental? You hear this story about maybe a more chemically insulated build fabric has a high rate. Say it's out of 10, has 8 out of 10 start off with, but then after 5 years has dropped to 3 out of 10. And then maybe a more natural fabric starts off at 6, but then stays at 6 pretty much through the full 10 years. I mean,
I think there's a fascinating discussion to be had around particularly embodied carbon, which is a big thing hitting people's radar. So essentially the decarbonisation of insulation of buildings. I mean, the degradation of the insulation properties, I kind of get that. But certainly business owners need to be aware, beyond the things that we've recently seen with fire regulations and Grenfell Towers and some of the issues with high-rise buildings, is that balance between making sure that buildings are more energy efficient, the perpetual battle with thickness and space, dimensional constraints on a building, but actually the responsible nature in which that has been manufactured. So if you look at, say, Celotex is a very popular brand. This kind of rigid insulation that you see on almost every building site. You cut it with a saw, highly rigid, has got silver foil front and the back. Now that foam uses a ton of petrochemicals and some pretty nasty stuff to manufacture in the first place. It's highly efficient, and it means that you can have a much thinner dimension of insulation to help you save energy compared to, let's say, the other end of the spectrum, sheep's wool. Straight off the back of a sheep, very little processing. But you need a much thicker amount of insulation. You can achieve the same insulation values, but you've got thicker and thinner amounts that you need. One is a very responsible way of providing that insulation, and one is increasingly becoming a big no-no for various reasons. And so we see a big transition, and this is one of the headaches, particularly if people are looking at improving the insulation on their building, to not only look at the products that they're using and their actual thermal performance, but from a more responsible angle of sourcing that insulation and what it's doing to our planet, putting that insulation on the building to save energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And when organizations come to you, what sort of conversations do you have with them initially?
It tends to fall into two categories, really. There are a big bunch of companies that come to us and say we're looking at making this change, and the local authority expects us to jump over this particular bar. Now, that may be something called BREEAM. It may be a certain level of carbon reduction by way of a percentage, and so they're very much kind of stick. We're being we're being forced to do this. How do we do this as kind of cost effectively as possible? We're not going to go over and above, but we understand that we've got some energy efficient criteria that we need to meet. So how can we kind of professionally navigate that and make sure we're doing what we need to do? And then the other type of conversation that we have from clients is, and this is increasingly the case, is we understand that there is a compliance that we have to meet for this building. But what's really important for our brand is to show that, this will be an exemplar building, or we see a big opportunity here to market this as net zero carbon, or a considerable improvement on what is expected. And they can see the wider opportunity there for telling a much more compelling story to their staff, to their clients, to their customers. And certainly the latter of those two is a really interesting one, because it allows you to, for any of those guys who are listening to the podcast, if any of you guys have read Simon Sinek, he talks about this kind of golden circle principle. You've got how, what, and why, and in the middle of that is the why. And I think increasingly as businesses do this sustainability stuff, the really interesting conversation is why are you doing it? And there's a huge opportunity there, and that certainly generates some of the more enlightening conversations for our clients. Is really digging underneath all of those layers and finding out beyond, just kind of a business becoming more profitable. What are the real reasons for them doing this sustainability stuff? And I think we'll continue seeing more of that as time goes on.
That's really interesting. I was do you have a building for your team to go into, or do you work all remotely?
A bit of both, actually. I mean, we as I say, our offices were in a lovely. It's not quite listed, but it looks like a kind of a listed building right smack bang in the middle of Farnham in Surrey. It's a 3-story building. We have a lease on the whole building, but we have a beautiful top office with some great view of some building sites at the minute. Loads of exposed beams. Doubt there's lots of lath and plaster and stuff in the building. Hopefully not too much asbestos. at the moment, it's me in a 3-story building all on my own. And the guys are working from home, and we'll see when restrictions ease what that new blend of people coming to the office is like.
I guess what I'm getting at is, are you a nightmare to have as a tenant because you are wanting to push your landlord, or if you are a landlord, are you trying to perpetually, have you chosen the space, or how does your knowledge impact your own decisions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we in many ways we're kind of stuck with what we have. I mean, anybody who's had the pleasure of leasing a building knows that maybe beyond kind of painting the walls and maybe changing the carpets, it's unlikely you're going to make any big changes. One thing that really sticks out in my mind, that I mean, I'm sat here in an office with single glazed windows, probably no insulation in the roof. But a fascinating conversation I was having the other day with some of my other tenants. Actually, these are guys who are into sustainable marketing. So they market for sustainable brands and businesses. And funnily enough, they do our marketing. And we were talking to them about B Corporation status. Now, for any of your listeners who don't know what B Corporation businesses are, it's actually a legal entity, and it's a move to businesses being more responsible for looking after their staff and looking after the environment, and being more responsible businesses in a much wider context. And as a business, we are doing that. But one of those things, as part of the verification process, was looking at where we source our energy from, who we buy our gas from, who we buy our electricity from. And both of our companies were going through that verification process at the same time. And we were having a conversation about, well, okay, yes, we might be on the cheapest, British Gas deal or E.ON Energy deal, but actually, when that comes up for renewal, or whether we do it earlier, shouldn't we just be going for 100% green tariff? That is something we can change. It's very, very trivial. Yes, it might cost us a bit more money, but that's something that sticks in my mind that we could be doing pretty rapidly, and that doesn't affect the building another way, but is a big nod and a tick in the box for something we have got, or something we can change and have got power over changing as a business.
Okay. So if you're going through the B Corp process, how do you engage your staff, suppliers and customers with your mission and purpose?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. It's always work in progress. I think being you cut through the middle of our business, and we're kind of sustainable to the core. We talk about our purpose a lot. And we have done some thinking over the last 12 months to reinstate that and make sure that was clear. I think that the purpose that we used to have as a business was actually a kind of a mission statement. But our purpose as a business is to inspire and forge a sustainable legacy, and we talk about that very, very often within the team. So when we're looking at this B Corporation move, the team completely understands why we're doing that. They understand why that's important. It weaves in very, very nicely with some of the other, kind of incentives and things that we've got going as a business. And certainly beyond just saying that we're sustainable, we're very keen about inspiring others, and as you mentioned there, our supply chain, the people that we're working with, the people that we interact with, to be more sustainable, learn how to be more sustainable, and better understand the topic. And that's why we do a lot of educational work as a business. So the staff get that, and as I say, we talk about that on a regular basis.
Mm. When it comes to running an ethical and sustainable business, what would you say has been your biggest struggle so far? And can you tell us a bit about how you've overcome it?
Yeah, I think kind of on a practical day-to-day basis. So as I said, I formally set this business up 7 years ago from a bedroom. It was me, a chair, a desk, and a laptop. And like every business when it starts, in most cases it's an idea, and a lot of cold calling goes on. And I think one of the biggest practical challenges over the last 5 or 6 years really has been getting people to just open their mind a bit, and look at sustainable technologies, look at alternatives to gas, look at alternatives to oil fuel. And this is when we're dealing with clients who are on those fuels already, be it houses or businesses. What has made that a lot easier for us in many ways is the big shake-up around the pandemic and the changing in people's priorities over the last 12 months. And speaking to many people in the sector, I think the last 12 and 18 months has had a radical change on the way that the wider public, and as a result, businesses are taking sustainability more, far, far more seriously. So on a practical day-to-day basis, we have less conversations where we're trying to persuade and convince. People are almost pre-qualified when they pick up the phone. They get it, because they're seeing it. Friends are talking about it. They're seeing it on the news. They may have had a discussion with their family over the dinner table about what's happening to the earth and the fact that it's warming up, or some of these other things. So that's a fascinating change. And I think, the other, I'm just trying to think about the other kind of struggles. That has been a big one. I think for me as a business owner, I thought about this before we were kind of prepping for the podcast, and I think what is difficult or initially for me, I had to kind of get my head around, is we are smack bang in the middle of a kind of a sustainable revolution. We're very well placed as a consultancy to ride the growing wave that's coming and building underneath us. And I think if I was being a kind of a cold hard business person, you could view being an ethical business, making contributions to charity, making contributions to carbon offsetting, doing the right thing by staff, going for this B Corporation certification as, well, if I didn't do those things, then I'd have a lot more money in the bank and I would be a more profitable business. And I think as a business owner, I've come to realize that by investing in those sustainable aspects to the business, which on the face of it are a cost, are actually quite a smart investment. Because if you invest, in those right kind of things, you've got as I say, a far more compelling brand story, and you're really walking the walk for your clients. People, clients, customers see through the greenwash. If it's a web page that says you're sustainable and you do nothing else in that regard, people very, very quickly realize that it's utter twaddle. And so I say, because we do those things, I can sleep well, I can talk convincingly to our customers and clients. And it's a struggle I've overcome as a business owner, and one that I'm at peace with and can see the real wider benefit, particularly to recruitment and the staff that are working in the business, because they see business warts and all as well, and they get that the business is in it for the long haul and making those sustainable investments in the right places.
Absolutely. We've just commissioned a piece of work to look at what B Corp enhances, and the environment enhances us and clients and staff, and retention of people is absolutely quite very high up there. But equally, there's quite a lot of research that shows that businesses that have a vision and purpose that is, or puts their purpose above profit, actually do better in the long run. They have more longevity. And they are actually more profitable. They grow faster, and I think it's because people buy off people. At the end of the day, if you've got two choices, which one are you going to go for? The one that you'd quite like to work with, or the one that you just go, oh, they're just delivering a service?
Yeah, and that's true. And I think now more than ever, we realise that as I mentioned before, the groundswell of public opinion and the priorities of purchasers now is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger deal. And like you said, if you're in a lineup and you are doing things as a business which are seen as touching your customers, kind of sensibilities, and that just kind of chimes with what they're trying to do. Of course, they would take your proposal more seriously, even if it was more expensive. Within reason, you are setting yourself apart for a very, very good and honest reason, and there's every chance that a customer, when they buy from you, is already invested. You're not just starting from a standing start. They, the fact that the service that you provide is kind of what they're after, but they know that they're aligning with a business that kind of gets them because they've already pre-selected the business because the business has shown what it's doing. So it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating way that things are changing, and people are looking beyond just what's the list price of a particular service. They're doing their due diligence. It's very easy to find information on businesses now, find out what they're doing, what contributions they're making, what their mission and purpose is, if you choose to make that clear. And we're up for that, and we have already seen that working in our favour.
To those listeners that know that listen on a regular basis, they know that actually I very rarely say something good about, it's not, this podcast is about you, but just recently we pitched for some work and we were double what our next person was, because they said they would do it for half price for a case study, and they said that they would go with us, which backs up. And I've never seen that. I had that before, so it absolutely backs up what you've just said, and hence bringing it into the conversation. I think that's something that's really well worth taking home when building your business and just trying to grow your business, is thinking about that. It is so much more powerful than you think, and you can't put money on it. You can't, like you've just said. You could. You're right. Not do the charity work, not do that, not do this, and yes, you in theory would have a probably 10-15% better profit margin, but you're not in a stronger position to win the work.
I think particularly, looking at, again, from a business owner's perspective, we very much see that as a massive appeal for recruiting, team members for a growing business as well, and so it becomes self-fulfilling if you're a business which, as I say, you cut through the middle and you're genuinely sustainable, kind of through and through, and you can. You can be profitable. That will attract a higher caliber of individual, and you just can't. While somebody may have a particular degree or a particular type of experience, you'll increasingly find that if you're looking to attract, kind of younger team members, the millennials or Generation Z, or whatever the younger guys and girls are called now, it really, really, really matters to them having that purpose, having that mission, and they're already so motivated to do a great job for a cause that they really, strongly believe in, and that makes a business owner's job so much easier, because you can't, paying somebody a higher salary that washes away pretty quickly, and you're left with, why am I doing this work? Why am I contributing to this business? And so, whilst your accountant might say, oh, well, you can save a bit of money here, you can save a bit of money there, the team members that form that growing team or growing business, as you said, you can't qualify that. And if those people who are engaged with what the business are doing because of its sustainable credentials are finding you rather than going through a recruitment consultant, well, that's pretty easily traceable back to a saving. But it does make your life considerably easier, and people who are serious about running their businesses into the future need to get on board with that, because if you don't, dare I say, your competitors are going to be able to siphon off those more engaged talent out of the pool, and you're going to be left with the guys and girls who aren't so engaged. So make sure you're the former of those two, and it really doesn't. You're not talking about changing the face of your business. You're just talking about different messaging and just making sure that you're happy with doing something more than you're doing today.
So going on to the next question, if I may ask, have you carbon footprinted your organisation?
That is a very good question, and the honest answer is no. I couldn't give you a specific number. What I was very keen to do. We're very lucky because we're not manufacturing cars. We're not we're not travelling the lengths and breadths of Britain in vehicles and trucks and things. We are a consultancy business. We benefit greatly from Zoom. Noughts and ones in binary output meetings with clients. And we do work across the UK and Europe and even recently in the States. So we're very kind of low impact anyway. But one of the things that I was keen to do from the start was to make sure that we were kind of carbon neutral. So we've gone out of our way beyond the great work that we do on people's projects, helping them be more sustainable. We have gone out of our way to using gold standard projects offset carbon and make sure that everybody who is part of the business has what minimal carbon footprint they have offset. And again, that's a contribution that we make to make sure that we are doing our bit and going beyond that. And in fact, we do that for our customers now as well.
In what way?
We made a commitment.
You're not measuring.
Yeah. So just to clarify that, we made a commitment, as I say, beyond helping other people with their energy efficiency. We made a commitment to do more than being a carbon neutral business. And so something that we started at the beginning of this year is we said, right, okay, we need to do more here. We've got to remain a profitable business, but we need to do more here. And we committed to taking a percentage of our business's revenue, not profit, but the business's revenue, and again help with tree planting schemes and carbon offsetting schemes. So we've decided that 1% of our business's revenue, which would be considerably more based on the profitability of the business, goes to projects, and we do that for every individual client. So as money passes through the business, we have projects and clumps of trees that are planted across the globe. We make the client aware that we've gone above and beyond to do that for them. And so whilst we don't kind of necessarily quantify, counting every last kind of kilogram of carbon, what we have done is, made a contribution, as I say, beyond the work, the actual service that we've provided, which is proportional to the amount of consultancy, time that we've spent on that project, which is ultimately the end.
That makes sense. I can understand that. And is there any advice that you could offer listeners? I'd like to actually kind of go back to our initial chats. I mean, probably coming to the end of the podcast now, but is there any advice that you would give businesses starting out on their journey, knowing what you know? So if they're looking for offices, or if they're, what would you look for? What would you go for? And what sort of questions could you ask?
Blimey, yeah, that's a big question. I mean, beyond my interpretation, I think my interpretation of that question is, if rather than an established business, a business that is really an idea at this stage, and maybe starting with one or two or a few people, from a very, very kind of seed of an idea. And I would say, I've thought about this before because I've talked about this with other business owners, but I think, beyond, first and foremost, you've got to have a profitable idea. You've got to make sure your price point is right, and you've got money to play with to better, your offering, so that, you don't go bust in the process. There's no point in being sustainable and being responsible if you can't make money and sustain yourself and grow the business. And so I think it's very misunderstood that being sustainable, running a responsible business, has to be expensive. It doesn't have to be. Once you've figured out what your service is, or your product is for the wider market, there are some mission and purpose things that you've got to get straight. I mean, if you can spend the time on really figuring out what your core message is and core purpose is for the business, which is often means a great deal to the to the business starters, the entrepreneurs that have started the business. That's one thing that they can do. But beyond that, once you get into voluntary carbon offsetting or voluntary contributions to things to lessen your impact, then it doesn't have to be a lot of money, but it's got to be something which you can afford to give up on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, however frequently you want to do it. I don't think there's a number one thing to do, a number two thing to do, a number three thing to do. We've talked about, if you have your own offices, does it make sense to have them 100% renewably sourced by way of, say, electricity or gas, or those kinds of things. And I think it really depends on the listeners' priorities, but there are many sources that have a list of things that you can take a look at. And the best thing is don't rush into anything. Take your time, figure out what you can do, figure out what the costs are, figure out what the complexity is of making that particular change, and then pick a couple to do. Start with something. You haven't got to do everything. You haven't got to be the world's most sustainable business ever. Just do these things kind of one at a time, and you'll soon figure out how much hassle it is, how much money it costs you. And then genuinely, hand on heart, you can start promoting that you are doing those things. So beyond feeling good about it, you've got a great story to tell there, then suppliers and customers, and that you are doing those things. It's not just greenwash.
And are there any particular websites maybe that your own is good resources to find out? Because I know when we initially chatted, I talked about the fact that we did up our bungalow, and it hadn't been, nothing had been done to it since the early 60s. And so we literally gutted it. And I was a bit disappointed with our architect, because although he said he was environmental, the environmental things that were talked about were green roofs and solar panels and stuff that I was a bit like, well, yeah, expensive, but I like insulation. So we ended up triple glazing the windows. We ended up putting a lot more insulation in, and the builder actually turned around and went, yeah, I don't think you need any more insulation, Will. Seriously, you've probably got enough for this building at the moment. But I was going down the stuff that I knew, which was pretty rudimentary. And I work in this industry. So, how hard is it for people to, and is there other places that people can go to find how to do things properly?
I mean, that is a really tricky question. I think that is it's something that we're trying to resolve ourselves. There is a lot of people turn to internet search engines and stuff to try and find it out, or they ask their mate what they would do, or they just try and use their common sense, or they buy a whole load of books from an internet bookshop, for example, to try and read up on it themselves, and then make a kind of a ham-fisted attempt at trying to figure it out themselves. There are a few websites, but honestly, it is a real minefield. It is not an easy place at the moment to get that advice. There are consultancies like our own. There are a growing number of consultancies that are offering advice. Very few actual independent advice. Product manufacturers will offer you advice hand over fist, trying to then ultimately sell you product. But it is really, really tricky. We discussed before that we are very, very close to launching a platform which we think will help point people in a better direction and give people a chance to hang out. And that is exactly what this industry needs. There is a big knowledge and education piece of work that needs doing over the next few, well into the middle of the decade and beyond. And it's pretty scant pickings at the moment. But as I say, we're working on trying to change that because we see the opportunity there.
Brilliant. From what I can see, there's a massive opportunity. So I'm really glad someone's doing it. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Doug, for being on the podcast today. It's been really interesting listening to you and understanding more about your business and what it is that you guys get up to.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I'd say to anybody listening, do check us out. Mesh Energy. The website is a great pool of resources, but we're always happy to have people pick up the phone and just start that discussion. I think increasingly, we can all help each other out. We've just got to be more collaborative and be able to share. So the website is www.mesh-energy.com. And as I say, we're more than happy to have a chat with you and see if we can point you in the right direction, or maybe help you out longer term with your with what you're trying to do.
Brilliant. Well, we'll be putting all those details on the website. So thank you so much, Doug. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Will. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks for listening to our Sustainable Business podcast. If you want to learn more about sustainable business and talk to other like-minded professionals, apply to join to our online community at sustainabilitysolve.org. Join now and find a space for you to collaborate, learn and inspire others to become more environmental. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to follow Green Element on LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram.
So you really enjoy sustainability and want to be a part of the solution? Come and join our vibrant community now. Book a call and we can talk more.